Why did my daughter stop smiling the day she got married? My 6-year-old granddaughter asked me that question, and I could not lie to her anymore. If this story moves you even a little, hit like right now, subscribe before you forget, and share it with someone who still believes silence protects the people we love. It doesn't. Not always. My name is Edward Bennett. I am 72 years old, and for the last 9 years I have carried a secret so heavy that some nights I forgot how to breathe. It was not my secret to keep, not really. It belonged to my daughter, Grace. But she asked me to keep it, and I loved her too much to say no. Grace is 38 now. She has a daughter of her own, my granddaughter, Lily, who just turned 6. Lily has her mother's eyes, soft brown, always watching, always noticing things adults think children miss. And children miss almost nothing. I almost dropped my book. I had seen the old photographs too. Grace's wedding album, sitting untouched in a box in my closet for 9 years. In every single photo, Grace is standing straight, her lips pressed into something that looks like a smile, but isn't one. Her eyes tell the real story. They always have. I told Lily I would tell her when she was older. She accepted that answer the way children do, without argument, and went back to playing with her toy horses on the porch floor. But that night, I could not sleep. I sat in my armchair until 3 in the morning, staring at nothing, thinking about the promise I made to Grace 9 years ago, and wondering how long a person is supposed to protect someone by hiding the truth from someone else who deserves it. Because here is what nobody tells you about secrets. They do not disappear just because you stop talking about them. They sit in the walls of a house. They live in the space between two people at a dinner table. They show up in a woman's face every time a camera points at her, even when she is trying so hard to look happy for her daughter's sake. I decided that week that Lily deserved the truth. Not all of it. Not yet. But enough of it. Enough so she would understand her mother, not judge her. Enough so she would grow up knowing that the woman who tucks her in every night carries a wound that never fully closed, and that this wound is not something to be ashamed of. It is something to be understood. Let me take you back to where this really started, because you cannot understand the ending without knowing the beginning. Grace was always the kind of daughter every parent hopes for. Bright, kind, a little too trusting of people, which used to worry her mother and me even when she was young. She graduated top of her class in college, took a job as a schoolteacher because she said children deserved someone patient in their lives, and for years, she was happy in a simple, uncomplicated way. Then she met a man named Nathan Cole. Nathan was charming in the way that fools everyone, including people who think they are too smart to be fooled. He had a good job at a financial firm downtown. He opened doors for Grace, remembered small details about her life, sent flowers to her classroom on the first day of every school year. My wife, Margaret, God rest her soul, adored him from the very first dinner. I liked him too, if I'm honest. He shook my hand firmly, looked me in the eye, and told me he intended to spend his whole life making Grace happy. I believed him. That is the part that still keeps me up some nights. I believed him completely, and I encouraged Grace to say yes when he proposed 2 years later on a beach at sunset, with a ring that must have cost him 3 months of salary. The wedding was beautiful. Grace looked like something out of a painting, and for one single day, I saw a happiness in her that I would not see again in quite the same way for a very long time. Looking back now, I wonder how many warning signs were sitting quietly in plain view, waiting for someone to notice them before the wedding instead of after. Nathan always insisted on driving whenever they went anywhere together, even short distances, even when Grace offered. At the time, I thought it was simply old-fashioned manners. Now I understand it was something else entirely, a small, early habit of controlling where she went and when she could leave. He also had a way of answering questions directed at Grace before she could answer them herself, finishing her sentences, deciding for her what she meant to say. Margaret used to joke that he was simply protective. I have since learned that control often wears the same clothing as protection, and it takes a trained eye, or a painful lesson, to tell the two apart. The first year of marriage seemed fine from the outside. Grace called Margaret every Sunday. She talked about her classroom, about small home renovations, about the trip to Italy Nathan promised her for their anniversary. Nothing seemed wrong. Nothing seemed wrong because Grace made sure of it. That is something I learned much later. People who are hurting the most are often the best at hiding it, because hiding it has become their way of surviving the week. The change happened slowly, the way rust spreads across metal you are not paying attention to. Grace stopped coming to family dinners as often. When she did come, she checked her phone constantly, and her laugh, which used to fill a room, became quieter, shorter, almost apologetic. Margaret noticed before I did. Mothers usually do. She mentioned it to me one night in bed, said something felt different about Grace, something she could not name, but could feel, the way you feel a storm coming before the sky changes color. I told her she was imagining things. I told her newlyweds go through adjustments. I was wrong, and it took me far too long to admit it. The truth came out on a Tuesday night in October, 9 years ago. Grace showed up at our front door at 11 at night. No coat, no bag, just her car keys clenched so tightly in her fist that her knuckles had gone white. Her face was pale. Her hands were shaking. And when Margaret opened the door and asked what was wrong, Grace collapsed into her arms and cried in a way I had never heard her cry before, not even as a child. It took us almost an hour to get the full story out of her, because every time she tried to speak, the words seemed to catch somewhere in her throat, as if saying them out loud would make them permanently real. Nathan had not been the man any of us thought he was. Behind closed doors, the charm Margaret and I saw at dinner tables had a different face entirely. It started small, the way these things almost always do. A comment about her weight disguised as a joke. A criticism about how she folded laundry, delivered with a smile, so no one watching would suspect it was cruelty. Then it grew. He controlled the money, even though Grace worked full-time. He decided which friends she was allowed to see, slowly cutting her off from people who might have noticed something was wrong. He tracked her phone. He timed her drive home from school and questioned her if she was even 10 minutes late. And then it stopped being only words. I will not describe every detail, because some things are not mine to share in full, even now, even in a story meant to protect other people from going through what my daughter went through. But I will tell you this. That Tuesday night, Nathan had grabbed her by the arm hard enough to leave bruises that lasted almost 2 weeks, because she had spoken to a male coworker at a school event. When she tried to pull away, he blocked the front door and told her she was not leaving the house. She got out through a window. She drove straight to us with nothing but her car keys and the clothes on her back, because in that moment, our house was the only place in the world that still felt safe to her. I have never in my life felt anger the way I felt it that night. I am not a violent man. I raised my daughter to believe in patience, in forgiveness, in giving people the benefit of the doubt. But sitting in my living room at midnight, watching my 30-year-old daughter shake like a frightened child while she showed her mother the bruises on her arm, something in me broke that has never fully repaired itself. I wanted to drive to that house immediately. Margaret held my arm and told me that would not help Grace, that what Grace needed right now was safety, not another man losing his temper. She was right, as she almost always was. So I sat there, and I held my daughter, and I let her cry until there was nothing left in her to cry with. We did not sleep that night. None of us did. The days that followed were some of the hardest our family has ever lived through. Grace stayed with us for almost 3 months while the legal process began. Nathan tried everything a man like that tries. He called constantly at first, alternating between apologies and threats, sometimes in the same phone call. He hired a lawyer who tried to paint Grace as unstable, as exaggerating, as a woman who simply could not handle the pressures of marriage. It is a terrible thing, watching someone try to rewrite the truth in real time, right in front of the people who lived through it with you. If this story is stirring something in you, something familiar or something that reminds you of someone you love, please do not scroll past this. Tap that like button, subscribe to this channel so more stories like this one reach the people who need them. And if you know someone going through something similar, send this to them tonight, not tomorrow, tonight. Nathan's lawyer even suggested, at one point, that Grace had bruised her own arm and was fabricating the story to gain sympathy in the divorce proceedings. I remember sitting in that lawyer's office, my hands clenched under the table, listening to a stranger try to convince a room full of people that my daughter had hurt herself on purpose. Grace sat perfectly still through the entire meeting, her face calm, almost distant, the way a person looks when they have already survived the worst part and nothing said in a conference room can touch them anymore. It was one of the only times in this whole story that I felt genuinely proud and genuinely heartbroken in the exact same moment. Grace was strong in ways I still do not fully understand, because at 30 years old, She found the courage to do what many people twice her age struggled to do. She left. Completely. No looking back. No wondering if she made the wrong choice, even on the hardest nights. But leaving does not erase what happened. That is something I learned watching my own daughter heal, slowly, over years, not months. The bruises on her arm faded within weeks. The bruises no one could see took much longer. For the first year after the divorce was finalized, Grace barely spoke about it at all. She moved back into a small apartment near the school where she taught, threw herself into her students, into grading papers late into the night, into anything that kept her hands and mind busy enough that she did not have to sit still with her own thoughts. Margaret and I worried constantly. We invited her to dinner every single week, sometimes more, just to make sure she was eating, sleeping, still functioning like a person and not just a shell going through the motions of a life. Slowly, something began to shift. It started with small things. She laughed at something Margaret said at dinner, really laughed, the kind that reaches the eyes. She started painting again, something she had loved in college and had not touched in years. She began seeing a therapist twice a week, a decision I am prouder of than almost anything else in this whole story, because it takes a certain kind of bravery to sit across from a stranger and say out loud the things that hurt the most. During that first year alone, Grace also did something I did not fully appreciate until much later. She began writing letters to herself, not to send anywhere, just to keep in a drawer, describing small proofs that she was becoming okay again. A letter about the first night she slept without checking the lock 3 times. A letter about the first time she ate dinner out with friends and laughed loud enough that people at the next table turned to look. A letter about the first morning she woke up and did not immediately think about him before she thought about anything else. She showed me a few of those letters once, years later, and reading them, I finally understood healing in a way I never had before. It is not one big, triumphant moment. It is a collection of tiny, almost invisible victories that only mean something when you look back and count them together. 2 years after the divorce, Grace met Daniel, a quiet, patient man who taught at the same school. He was nothing like Nathan, and I think that is exactly why Grace trusted him, slowly, carefully, one small step at a time. He never rushed her. He never asked her to explain more than she was ready to explain. When she finally told him the full story, almost a year into dating, he simply held her hand and told her none of it was her fault. I remember Grace telling me that was the moment she knew she could love again without being afraid. They married quietly 3 years later. No big wedding, no huge guest list, just family and a handful of close friends in our backyard, under the same oak tree Grace used to climb as a little girl. And a year after that, Lily was born. You would think, watching Grace with Lily, that the story ends there, happy, healed, complete. In many ways, it does. Grace is a wonderful mother. She is patient in a way I am not sure I ever fully was with her. She reads to Lily every single night, no matter how tired she is from teaching all day. She has built a life that is genuinely good, genuinely safe, genuinely hers. But healing is not the same as forgetting, and it is not the same as returning to who you were before. Grace still does not smile easily in photographs. Not because she is unhappy, but because somewhere along the way, smiling on command, performing happiness for a camera, became something her body associates with a different time in her life. A time when she smiled at dinner parties while hiding bruises under long sleeves. A time when looking happy was a survival skill rather than an honest expression. Her therapist explained it to Margaret and me once, in a family session Grace asked us to attend. Trauma does not always look like crying or breaking down. Sometimes it looks like a woman who flinches slightly when a door slams too hard, even years later. Sometimes it looks like someone who checks the locks twice before bed, every single night, out of habit rather than fear. And sometimes it looks like a small, guarded smile in family photos, a smile that protects something underneath it rather than reveals it. That is what Lily has been seeing her whole life, without understanding why. And that is what she asked me about on the porch 2 weeks ago. I remember asking Grace once, years after the divorce, whether she ever regretted marrying Nathan in the first place, whether she wished she could go back and warn her younger self. She thought about it for a long moment before answering, longer than I expected. Then she told me something I have never forgotten. She said she does not regret the marriage, because it taught her the exact difference between being loved and being controlled, a difference she might never have learned any other way. And that difference is now the foundation of everything good in her life with Daniel. I do not know if I could have found that kind of grace, no pun intended, in her position. But she did, and it changed the way I think about pain in general. Sometimes the worst chapters of a person's life become the very thing that teaches them how to recognize goodness later on, even though no one would ever choose to learn that lesson the hard way if they had another option. In the weeks leading up to that porch conversation, I spoke with Grace privately several times, asking her how she wanted me to handle it if Lily ever asked again. She told me she trusted my judgment, but she also asked me to promise one thing, that whatever I said, I should make sure Lily understood that her father, Daniel, had nothing to do with any of it, and that Lily should never for a second doubt the safety of the home she is growing up in now. That request told me everything about the kind of mother Grace has become, someone so focused on protecting her daughter's sense of safety that even in a painful conversation about her own past, her first instinct was to shield her child's present. I want to tell you what I decided to do because I think it matters, not just for my family, but maybe for anyone listening who is trying to figure out how to talk to a child about something painful in the family's past. I did not tell Lily everything. She is 6. There is no need for a 6-year-old to carry the full weight of what happened to her mother before she was born. But I also did not lie to her, because children can sense a lie even when they cannot name it, and lies have a way of teaching children that certain feelings are not allowed to be spoken about out loud. I sat her down on the porch, the same spot where she asked the question, and I told her that a long time ago, before Daniel, her mother was married to a different man, and that man was not kind to her. I told her that her mother was very brave, braver than almost anyone I have ever known, because she left a situation that was hurting her, even though it was scary and hard to do. I told her that sometimes, when someone has been hurt in the past, it becomes harder for them to smile big and easy in pictures, even when they are truly happy inside, because their body remembers old pain even after their mind has healed. Lily was quiet for a long time after that. Then she asked me if her mommy is happy now. I told her yes. I told her that her mother is one of the happiest people I know because she chose, every single day, to keep loving, to keep trusting, to keep building a good life, even after someone tried to convince her she did not deserve one. Lily nodded slowly, the way children do when they are turning something over in their small minds. Then she said something that undid me completely. She said, "I'm going to smile extra big in pictures so mommy remembers what happy looks like." I had to walk inside and sit down for a moment after that. Some things a 72-year-old man is simply not prepared for, even after everything he has lived through. I decided to share this story publicly for a reason, and it is not to embarrass my daughter or expose something private for the sake of a video. Grace knows I am telling this story, and she gave her permission, on the condition that I never use our real last name, and that I focus on the lesson rather than the pain. She told me, and I am quoting her almost exactly, that if even one person watching recognizes their own life in this story and finally finds the courage to leave, then telling it will have been worth every uncomfortable memory it brings back up. So let me speak directly to whoever needs to hear this right now. If you are sitting somewhere watching this, and something in this story feels a little too familiar, a partner who controls the money, who isolates you from friends, who makes you feel small in ways that are hard to explain to people outside the relationship, please listen to me carefully. You are not imagining it. You are not overreacting. And you are not alone. If you are watching this and you are not sure whether what you are experiencing counts as something serious enough to leave over, please hear this clearly. You do not need a bruise to justify walking away. You do not need permission from anyone, including me, including your own family, including the version of yourself that still wants to believe things will get better on their own. If a relationship makes you feel smaller, quieter, more anxious, more apologetic for existing than you used to be, that is information, and it deserves your attention. Abuse rarely starts with a bruise. It starts with words. It starts with someone slowly convincing you that your instincts cannot be trusted, that your friends are the problem, that you are lucky someone puts up with you at all. By the time it becomes physical, if it ever does, the emotional groundwork has usually been laid for years. That is what makes it so hard to leave. Not weakness, not stupidity. A slow, deliberate erosion of a person's confidence in their own perception of reality. My daughter got out. She got out because, even in her darkest moment, some small part of her still believed she deserved better, and she trusted that small part enough to drive through the night to her parents' house instead of staying one more hour in a place that was no longer safe. Not everyone has a family waiting with an open door. That is why places like domestic violence hotlines and shelters exist. And if you or someone you love ever needs them, please reach out. There is no shame in asking for help. The only shame belongs to the people who make help necessary in the first place. We are getting close to the end of this story now, and I want to take a moment here, because if you have stayed with me this long, it means this story matters to you, and that matters to me. Please like this video, subscribe if you have not already, and leave a comment telling me one word that describes how this story made you feel. I read every single one, and I promise you, they matter more than you know. Before I finish telling you the rest of this, I want to ask you for one small thing. Not for me, but for Grace, and for everyone like her watching right now who needs to know these stories reach people. If this has meant something to you, tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment so this story climbs higher and lands in front of someone who is sitting in silence tonight, wondering if anyone would understand. Your comment might be the reason it finds them. 9 years have passed since that Tuesday night. Grace teaches second grade now, in a different school, in a different town, far from the house she once had to escape through a window. She still keeps the window in that memory close. She told me once, not as something that haunts her, but as a reminder of the moment she chose herself over fear. Daniel adores her the way she always deserved to be adored, quietly, consistently, without conditions attached. Lily is growing into a curious, kind, wonderfully perceptive little girl who, I suspect, is going to grow up understanding something many adults never learn, that strength does not always look loud. Sometimes strength looks like a woman who smiles carefully in photographs, because she survived something that tried to take her smile away permanently, and every guarded smile she gives anyway is its own quiet act of defiance. A few nights ago, I found the old wedding album again, the one with Nathan, still sitting in that box in my closet. I almost threw it away. Then I decided against it, not because I wanted to keep it, but because I wanted Grace to decide its fate herself, when she is ready, if she is ever ready. Some decisions are not mine to make, even now, even as her father. What I have learned from all of this, watching my daughter fall and rebuild herself brick by brick over 9 long years, is that healing is not a straight line, and it is not a destination you arrive at and then stop thinking about. Healing is a daily choice. It is choosing to trust again after trust was weaponized against you. It is choosing to love again after love was used as a leash. It is choosing to smile, even carefully, even imperfectly, in a world that once tried to convince you smiling was something you had to earn. My granddaughter asked me why her mother never smiles in pictures, and I finally told her the truth, not because the truth is comfortable, but because silence protects the wrong people. Silence protects the ones who cause the harm. Speaking, even carefully, even years later, protects everyone else. If there is one thing I want you to remember after watching this, let it be this. If you know a woman who does not smile the way she used to, do not assume she is simply moody, or difficult, or ungrateful for the life she has. Ask yourself what she might have survived to get here. And then, instead of asking her to perform happiness for your comfort, sit with her, quietly, patiently, the way Daniel once sat with my daughter, and let her heal at whatever pace healing requires. Grace still does not smile big for cameras. But last month, at Lily's school play, I watched my daughter laugh, really laugh, at something silly her daughter did on stage, and for just a moment, I saw the same unguarded joy I remember from before any of this happened to her. It did not last long. It never lasts long, not yet. But it is there, more often now than it was 5 years ago, and more often than it was 5 years before that. That, to me, is what healing actually looks like. Not a sudden, permanent return to who you were before. A slow, patient collection of small, unguarded moments, stitched together over years, until one day, the guarded moments become the exception instead of the rule. My name is Edward Bennett. My daughter Grace is the bravest person I have ever known. And if you are watching this and you see even a small piece of yourself or someone you love in her story, I hope you know this. It is never too late to walk out that window, and it is never too late to smile again, even if, for a while, it has to start small. Sometimes I think about how differently this story could have ended. If Grace had stayed one more year. If she had never found the courage to climb out that window. If Margaret and I had told her, even gently, that marriage requires sacrifice, that she should try harder to make things work, the way some families still tell their daughters even now. I am grateful every single day that we did not say those words to her. And I am even more grateful that she did not need us to give her permission to save her own life. She gave herself that permission, in the dark, at 11 at night, with nothing but her car keys in her hand. If you take one thing from everything I have shared today, let it be this. A person's ability to leave a harmful situation is not a small thing, and it should never be treated as a small thing by the people who love them. It should be honored, protected, and supported without judgment, without questions about what she could have done differently, and without any suggestion that she should have endured more before deciding enough was enough. My daughter did not fail at marriage. She succeeded at recognizing danger and choosing survival, and there is nothing in this world more important than that. Thank you for staying until the end of this story. If it touched you, share it with someone tonight who might need it more than they will ever admit out loud. Like this video so it reaches more people who need to hear it. And subscribe, because there are more stories like this one still waiting to be told, and every single one of them deserves to be heard. Exact word count, 5068. Status, script complete.